Hello everybody and welcome to Custom Cards episode, I don't know, like 15 or so. And this week we're gonna look at board spells, field spells that affect the entire board. At least that's what I thought when I made up the challenge for this week. As it turns out, I was not really clear with my words, and so some spells are just, affecting the board. Like a card like Hellfire affects everything, but isn't a board spell. So for like half the submissions, sorry, but yeah, they didn't quite make it. Happens, and here's the very first card. Demonic Area would be a dual class spell, kind of like Skullmancy cards, for Demon Hunter and Warlock. It makes sense because demons have +2/+2, which for 4 mana is a really interesting effect. That would mean the game would be broken, and you would just win. On top of that, all other minion tribes have -1/-1, so if you were to play against, let's say, a Mag hand buff Paladin in Wild, the hand buff would go away, kind of. What I'm not too sure about is, if you were to have something like a field spell in Hearthstone, which is the idea of this entire episode, would you be able to interact with that? In Yu-Gi-Oh! You can just use something like Mystical Space Typhoon and then no-scope that. But in any case, with this spell over here, that would be pretty good for any Zoo Warlock, I would assume. Like in the worst case, you play something like Imp Gang Boss and then it summons a bunch of 3/3 imps forever. That's a lot of stats. And after Demonic Area for 2 classes, here is one for 1 class, and that is something for Shaman, the Elusive Wilderness. I'm not sure how they made this card. Maybe there's something like an option to create field spells on any website because this looks pretty cool. Effect is pretty simple. You know a fairy dragon, you can't interact with that. I mean, you can, but you can't use spells on that. Whether you are friendly, an enemy, a random ogre on the board, you can't just target that. And this way, every single minion has that effect. You want to buff things? No, you don't. You want to use Fireball to remove stuff? No, you don't. With this effect for just 3 mana, I would think that you would just hard counter Mage. And I guess also Priest, especially if this card would be in something like Classic Hearthstone where you have Mind Control and that is an actual card people play. With this card, would be kind of funny. You would just completely ignore multiple classes in the game. And I like that. The only problem would be that you spend 3 mana on that, and it also benefits your opponent. To be fair, Shaman has AoE effects most of the time instead of single target removal, but it's still a buff for kind of everything. I like the idea. Maybe there would be something like Mist on the entire battlefield, maybe it turns blue, or nothing, and it just gives the effect to all the minions. Then a legendary Warlock spell, Layer of Sacrifice, where this field spell is active. The first spell you cast each turn costs health instead of mana. The ability to use a spell with health, so HP instead of mana, is on like I think 3 cards. There's Chagall, there's a Murloc, and there is Blood Bloom. And I think that's actually it, those 3. With that field spell, you would have the effect every single turn, and then something like Arena deck, that will be a lot of tempo, considering that taking damage doesn't matter too much, because you heal back anyways. In something like actually in any Warlock deck. Actually just in any deck ever, this card is just insane. If this card would exist, you could just cast a 10 mana spell. I mean in Warlock there isn't really that much, you can cast something like Doom, but imagine this card for Mage. You could use Puzzle Box of York on turn 3 or 4. That would be quite powerful. I just think there should be more effects that have the use health instead of mana card text on the card itself. Because it does exist, that is something in the game, they just don't make use of it, so yeah. I would sacrifice something to get the Layer of Sacrifice. And the Murmurs of Mortality. For the rest of the game, whenever a minion dies for the first time, it also kills something on the other side, whether it's for you or your opponent. But not if a minion dies because of this effect. So it wouldn't be like a bunch of boom bots that just fly back and forth across the entire battlefield. It would just be, your minion dies, something else dies, that's the effect. That's kind of cool, because it focuses on Death Rattle minions. You could make a Death Rattle themed deck with this card, and then you get a benefit, and the opponent gets no benefit. And if they get a benefit, then you get the benefit too, because your minions have... Yeah, you get the idea. I would like to play Egg Zulok with this card on turn 5. And then whenever an Nerubian Egg dies, Scarab Egg, Egg number Devil Sword, all of those. There would be another benefit. I would like it even more, and I think that's too hard for Hearthstone to program, if it is like the chess mechanic we had in Karazhan, where the minion on the other side dies. So exactly the minion across to it. The only problem is that in Hearthstone, despite having 7 board spaces, you can't just put one on the far left. It's always like in the middle, unless your board is kind of full. All in all, Warlock spells are great, so here's another one. The Bloody Mana Orb. For just 3 mana, whenever a minion dies, you refresh a mana crystal. I think because it says countdown 4 on here, and I did not read the Discord message where it might very likely explain what countdown means, I think this just lasts for 4 turns and then it goes away. If that would be the case, or not, this is just a great card. You spend 3 mana, have a bunch of imps on the board, a bunch of garbage, and get the mana back. You ever wanted to make a 25 mana combo happen? That's kind of hard. How do you get 15 extra mana? You can use Emperor Taurus and Drakari Enchanter, or hear me out, you play Plague of Flames, on your own board with this spell. That way you will get a ton of mana. You could just summon a bunch of minions the turn before to set up any combo you would like to do. Now I'm a man of culture, I'm a man from Twitch, and we call this a PogChamp card. It's a pretty orb, it's 3 mana, it's an epic, and most importantly, it is a Warlock spell, and I would like to have that too. And then we get a card that is basically the new Nostalmo, but as an actual spell so you can make that effect happen. And it's called Sands of Time. Pretty simple, turns are only 15 seconds long. After playing about 200 games in Wild with decks that all included Nostalmo, not one single person that I encountered also played Nostalmo. I thought people are going to play that card, right? Because, you know, everybody mentioned that they're going to play that. Anyways, for the effect, I would like to have that so I can force my opponent to stop roping. So many people just take their time because they probably do something else on a different monitor. They probably watch YouTube or like YouTube videos or, you know, click on the sub button, stuff like that. And with the Sands of Time, I would get their attention and bring it back to the battlefield. Or the opponent plays Mage, has counterspell, and this doesn't happen. With only 15 seconds on that card, we go to yet another Warlock card. I feel like I'm either biased when I pick the cards, or you make a lot of Warlock cards. It is the Blood Plague for 5 mana. Death Rattle for every single minion. Deal 3 damage to your hero. So it's like Cobalt Sandstorm Trooper, the one that deals 3 damage to the enemy's face, but it deals damage to your own face instead. And that will be for all the minions. And the first thing that came to mind was Mad Summoner. Mad Summoner is a minion that summons the entire board full of 1/1 imps. That means your opponent has an entire board full of stuff. You too. And you could then use something like Defile and your opponent takes 21 damage. And you take 18 and you probably die, but the opponent takes 21, that's 3 damage more than you do. That would make a bunch of OTKs happen. It could also mean that this backfires very likely and very easily. But now imagine, you would also play Death Rattle Synergy with cards like Baron Rivendell, for example, and you give that to your opponent using Treachery. And then you freeze that every single turn so it stays alive and they take 6 damage every turn. That sounds way too complicated. But now, let's stop with the Warlock cards. Let's focus on the fire spells. Or like Firebenders in Avatar The Last Airbender. Sultan's Comet, that is where the reference is from. In the last season, they had a comet, which boosts all the Firebender's abilities. This way, the card would be in Hearthstone. And I really like this idea for spell schools. Imagine a field spell that supports your spell school, transforms everything into fire, or you have like an animation of a meteor flying around, something that adds something to the board itself. We have different game boards, different clickables and interactables. That might be a real word. And this way, you could add something to it. That would be so sick. That's probably something they will make in the next 3 years, when it's too late. But if we had that right now, it would be really cool. Like you could really build a deck that feels like it's your deck. And if you would also take this one step further, imagine you would have that also for tribes. So you had like spell schools and tribes that get affected by this. And then at some point you just take it another step further, delete everything from the game, and just make it Avatar The Last Airbender, so you have like 4 elements. But I digress, it's like I'm focused on a battle. Winning a battle in the arena, the Gurubashi arena. In World of Warcraft, as far as I know, every couple hours or so in the Gurubashi arena, the place in the game, there is a treasure chest that you can loot, but it actually takes like a long time to open that chest. So players come in and fight each other until they're the last one alive, and then they open the chest. And this is kind of the exact same idea, but put into Hearthstone. So the next time a player ends the turn without anything alive, without any minion on their side of the board, the opponent will get a treasure. The fantastic treasures are the ones by Marin the Fox, so like summoning a legendary or drawing a handful of cards. And that sounds like a really interesting effect, because sometimes you will need to just waste minions in your hand that you would like to keep on for later. At least when you play a control matchup. You could force control players to throw away their combo pieces, for example. To throw away their stuff. But Solem, you might say. In that arena, do ogres even have a chance? Yes, if they cast Ogromancy, a 3 mana spell for Mage. It is quite a powerful effect, because for the rest of the game, it transforms every minion wherever they are. Even if they died already, enter in the resurrection pool, they become random ogres. And there's some really strong ogres out there. We get Boulder Fist Ogre, Optimistic Ogre, Ogromancer, a lot of ogres. And the cool thing about that is, you could give your opponents ogres too. So both you and your opponent play the best minion type out there. And even better, if you face a big priest, they play ogres, which you are allowed to resurrect, but no other minion type. And a similar effect to the effect that ogres have is Pure Darkness. Every minion has a 50% chance to attack the wrong character. That is not just the effect of a normal ogre, that's the effect of a really strong ogre, because you could even attack your own characters. For just 5 mana, you could have the effect of Major Norgenfogger on the entire board. And that would be so strong that playing Pure Darkness Priest would be a tier 1 deck that people play to rank 1 legend. Imagine the aggressive demon hunter you face. They can't hit you, they hit themselves. Every time a minion attacks something, it might just hit its neighbor. And I would imagine the entire game board would also be like at 50% darkness, so it's just so dark you can't even see it yourself. And that way, we could crash Hearthstone on mobile clients forever. Wow, wouldn't that be amazing? And with a lot of pure darkness, I would say, see you guys next week for the last episode of Custom Cards with this person. I mentioned in a video last week that I would like to focus on different style of content, and while custom cards are fun at all, I don't feel the spark anymore that I felt in the beginning. I don't feel the mechanisms of my mind working as they used to. So I think for the foreseeable future, this will be the last custom cards episode. I appreciate all you guys' submissions of the past 12 weeks. And there's only one last thing to say, and that is, next week's episode is going to be about your favorite card that you ever made. That's the theme for custom cards for the last episode. Just your favorite card you ever made. And until then, here are more custom cards, and I see you guys next week on Monday for the last episode of me speaking about cards you guys made. Take care.